Namaste, everyone. Namaste. Welcome to Instagram Live. I'm doing this is a pilot project that I've been meaning to do for some time now that I'm calling Office Hours. Famously, Mr. Iyengar, BKS Iyengar, he in his hi mom, at his institute in Pune, he would spend the afternoons in his library, and you could go down and read books, check books, and ask him questions. And when I was in college, of course, the professors I had always had office hours, Friday afternoon at 3:00 or what have you. So you could, build up questions and sort of be confused with material or do the homework and eventually come and be able to sit and ask questions. And I've always sort of longed for that in yoga. And so not to say I have all the answers, that's for sure. Not that I do not have all the answers, but that I believe that discussion and opportunity to talk about our work as yoga teachers can be very helpful. So I am hosting this as an office hours, and my intention is, if this goes well, who knows how it goes, but if it seems well received, then I will continue to do this as an opportunity to simply offer any of my experience and offer any of my my knowledge, my limited knowledge on the subjects of practice and teaching. So this is the inaugural Wild Lotus office hours. So some of you are joining online. Thank you for coming. And I'll post this, and after it will be there for you to review. I requested people to send in some questions if there were any, and there were. I got a number of questions sent to me, and I did not prepare answers. So I am going to just speak stream of consciousness and share what thoughts I have on the questions that were sent to me. The first question is, why aren't you getting your hair cut? So to that question, I say I will shortly. It's Chinese New Year next week, and one of the traditions before Chinese New Year is to have your hair cut. So that will be coming on this weekend. Now, in an attempt to share my position, I thought I would begin by saying I'm a yoga teacher of over 25 years. And my studies have traveled sort of a variety of traditions. And one of my sort of insights was that I was very interested in the technique of yoga. So certainly being the alignment technique and the sequencing technique of Hatha yoga classes. And so the primary studies that I've participated in have been in the schools of alignment. A lot of them have been Iyengar teachers, and before that, Anusara teachers, and people of great knowledge of the body and its capabilities. So my teaching is presented under the name Wild Lotus, and Wild Lotus is this is the name I use to identify the specific approach I take to teaching. And it has 3 wheels. Wild Lotus has 3 wheels of teaching. The first one is sequencing. The second one is alignment. And the third one is philosophy, or the gates of wisdom. So that's my position of teaching. And so there you have it. And I live in Hong Kong, and I travel to teach around the region and the world. And I feel as a still a very youthful practitioner. I practice all the time, and the purpose of this video and this streaming is really in alignment with my heartfelt feeling that as a teacher and maybe as a human, my intent is to be generous. So generous with what I know, generous with my energy, generous with what I've been taught, and to not hold back and to not gatekeep anything, but to give you what I have. The challenge I have is to be articulate and to have time tested what I know. The yoga path has a variety of terms for teacher. One is the famous term guru, G-U-R-U. Guru is sort of the esteemed, the highest level of teacher. Let's call it an enlightened, all-seeing being. And so clearly I am not that. But from there all the way down the rungs of different teachers, we have the idea there's an instructor. An instructor maybe is the first stage as a teacher where you're just telling people what to do. And along the lines of becoming a teacher, there is another stage, which is which was recently, I was recently reminded of the term acharya. And acharya means someone who teaches only what they've experienced. And I really like that term, and I feel like it's a good sort of wand to have, like to really think about, what am I teaching? What am I really intending to instill in others? Well, it's the things that I've experienced and the benefits of what have come from what I've done. So with having said all of that, I will certainly get things wrong, and I will share what I know, but I'm not here to say, on Instagram where everything is a brutal attack and everyone loves to destroy each other, especially in the yoga world, which I find so alarmingly sad. So much, BS on there. Anyway, not to get on that track, but having said all that, the disclaimer is I don't know everything, far from it, but I will share generously. So that's the first 10 minutes of this call. Now, I turn to the questions. So my fantasy as a young child was to have a radio show. Go ahead, caller. So the first question I have here is a practical question. The question is, in a yoga class, teachers often give options for certain poses. And as an example, they have stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and they offer demonstrations of these different levels. And those levels can be seen as progressions of poses. And the question goes on to say, however, sometimes teachers give options by saying things like, if this pose is in your practice, go for it. And that is usually done without a demonstration. So the question is, how can a teacher give options for certain poses without having to give demonstrations all the time, but also not dividing the energy in the room? This is a good question. One of the things that comes up for people is you have always a variety of people, different levels of practitioners in your class. And how can you give benefit to all people through a class? First thing I'd say is teaching fundamentals thoroughly is the best first step. Teaching fundamentals means teaching good structure and action in poses that everyone can do, basically. Let's say Uttanasana, Tadasana, downward dog, the warrior poses, triangle pose. These poses, teach them with fundamental instructions and encourage everyone to engage with detail. As you get further into more exploratory poses and more challenging poses, you can reference the same actions that the basic poses you are teaching. The challenge I see is people get very vague in the general poses, in the fundamental poses, and then try to get more specific as the pose gets more advanced. I find that to be less effective for teaching. Teaching basic poses at the beginning of class and giving good detail and giving people a chance to find them and to circle back and give feedback on how well they're doing wakes people up and builds sort of an accountability. And then as you move to more technically advanced or whatever poses, you kind of set the tone that we're being conscientious about the way we're doing the poses. And so as you move further, you may have people who can't do them, but they are already engaged. So they're already going to attempt the basic stage of a pose. Now, I don't teach in the way of like, if you can do this, then go do that and go do that. I tend to teach the whole group in a linear way. And I break down poses into stages. So often I'll teach like the stages of a pose by breaking down sort of the upper body portion of a pose or the lower body portion of the pose and sort of let go of the other part and sort of build up to doing the whole pose. Along the way, the students learn that they can always work on the previous stage of the pose. Now, when you teach kind of with more structure and more alignment, as I'm suggesting, you have to learn how to not get bogged down, over teach, or get stuck in the mud. If you're teaching most classes as a 1 hour experience, there's going to be an internal demand by most people to having done something. If you go to a 1 hour class, you do 2 poses, your class is going to become very small. That's just sort of the nature of it. Doesn't mean that's not bad. You can go to a class and do 2 poses in an hour and learn a lot. But you have to learn to manage teaching part by part poses, breaking things down, then building them up. But at the same time, there's a tempo. There's a sequential tempo that we need to like move the poses and the practice along. So one thing to remember is my approach is that I always think long term in terms of practice and teaching. I always think if someone's coming to my class, they're always going to come to my class. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous because most people don't all come back. But if I take the mood like you're all coming back, then I know I don't have to teach everything in every class. Also, if someone is not able to do it fully, you can still be helpful, give them clear, actions or corrections, and then encourage them, come on back tomorrow. Because the fact is, some people take time. I have students that are very physically able, but are, let's say, not really paying attention. So if you get stuck trying to like correct everything all the time, you end up never getting anywhere. You have to let people learn on their own time, meaning they come to your class, teach as best you can, and move things forward. So I prefer to come in with a sequence. And I prefer to have some kind of timing in my mind or even on a paper that I know that I'm going to work towards having this fulfilled. Now, when you break things down, as the question offers, I wouldn't break down every pose. I would maybe break down 1 or 2 poses in a staged progress, not the whole class. So every class I teach, there's specific poses I'm breaking down. And with my mood that everyone's coming back, I know over time they'll be able to work on the other poses too. Okay. Now the next question. Go ahead, caller. Sometimes I get students coming into class and when we're doing a pose such as pigeon and their hips are off the floor, I suggest to use a block or a blanket, but they refuse to use props. And even when I suggest that using a block or a blanket will be helpful, they say no really firmly, so much so that it feels confronting or strange. And that happens to me a lot. So that question is, I think, also common. I'm going to add two ideas based on this question. The first idea is that with teaching, we should, okay, this is my position. It's not an absolute truth, but my position is, and it's changed over time, is that we are not here to convert anybody. And with the nature of yoga as it is these days, people come and go to all sorts of classes. There's, in the general yoga world, people go to yin one day and vinyasa another and hot then, and they do all sorts of yoga. So it's not as if that they are holding to some specific value system or technical discipline. They're just kind of doing yoga. So that means that students may not already know the alignments that you're teaching. And so they'll have their own ideas. So I come back to what I said. I think it's a better position that we don't take on the idea of converting people. Meaning people do not need to do everything we say. There is autonomy and there is, sovereignty in everybody. When they go to the yoga class, you have to be able to let people sort of make decisions for themselves. However, we don't want to get bogged down or waste time with people who are actually not taking our expertise on. So what I mean is, if someone comes to class and you have a group of people, you want to teach to everyone. But if you come to a circumstance where some people are not willing to follow what you're doing, like they don't want to follow your instruction to take a blanket or to use some kind of prop, I think that it's going to be for most teachers best to say what they think, which is sitting on the blanket is going to be better. Or using this prop in this way this is for the purpose of our learning today. This is what we're doing. But not in a confronting way. I don't think that we're at a stage for most teachers where you can be like, you have to do it because I say so. You have to say, you can make decisions for yourself. But the purpose of coming to class is to learn. So we're not here to convert, we're here to teach. The only way teaching happens is if a teacher is generous with what they know and the student is receptive to experiment with what they are learning. In that way, it becomes a good match. So I don't have confrontations with students. I used to in my young years because I would feel confronted if someone didn't do what I said. And I would even feel like in those early years, if someone did their own thing, I would feel like I was a failure, like they were against me. And I've just learned over time that it's just not the case for me anymore. I feel like I have a bank of knowledge and experience, and I want to share it with you, and I'll do it generously with benevolence. And those that want to learn follow. When someone doesn't follow, I leave them alone. And I literally leave them alone. If someone is really not taking my feedback in a way that seems sort of incongruent with the class, then I just let them be. But I do not stay with my attention on them. Hope that's helpful. Okay. Someone says, in a similar way, there's comments about when teachers ask their students to move if they're in a specific position or the mats are a certain way, and the teacher says, can you move closer? Can you move your mat closer? Or can you come away? Or create some kind of structure to the mat setup so everyone's a little bit more together, and students are resistant to that. Two things happen. Well, for me, the mats are already at the studio, so I arrange the mats how I want them, so they're already there. But some people, they don't do that because people bring their own mats. So I think that, you can send a question here to the comments, no problem. The thing is, the relationship between student and teacher is like any deep and meaningful relationship is going to be largely based on trust. And trust takes time to build. So the less authoritarian we are, the easier it is to build that trusting relationship. The more we are clear with our knowledge and generous with wanting to help without trying to convince people. This is going to convey a different quality of energy. When a teacher is sort of demanding, you have to move your mat here, you have to use this blanket, although we may know it's better, it can create a discord and even a quiet conflict in the room. And I just feel like it's best to avoid that for most teachers. Look at it, as you get more mature and as you grow in your career as a teacher and you have more confidence in what you know is best for people in the room, then you can approach it differently. But you want to avoid having conflict. The energy of conflict, like between a student and a teacher, it really, it will detract from the teacher's ability to teach with that beautiful sense of loving generosity. It gets really blocked. And the teachers, look, I own a business and we've had hundreds of teachers over the years. And I've seen, myself included, people who are really conflictive and really kind of like feel the confrontation with students. It's not so much about the student. Even though we can have problematic dynamics with students, it really is something in us. Whenever I've had conflict with students, meaning reacted to them, it's been really something about me, something in me. It isn't to say they weren't playing a part, but my role as a teacher ultimately is to teach who I am. That's the mission, right? To teach, and to be fair, when we're being authentic, we do teach from who we are. We teach who we are. And I believe that's a practice, but it's also, that's the goal. So, by the way, that notion I just shared is such a beautiful learning. I learned that from the book, The Courage to Teach by Parker J. Palmer. One of my recommended books. Is it here? No. Parker J. Palmer. It's called The Courage to Teach. And when I read that 25 years ago, one of my first books, and he's talking about teaching. He's saying we teach who we are. What that means to me is that if I am coming out aggressively, then I can say it's because of the dynamic out here, or I can say, well, I'm teaching who I am. So if I'm being aggressive, then that's who I'm being right now. And if what I want is a loving generosity from me to the students that come to me, then I need to approach the situation of the class in that way. Okay. So basically, so far what I've said is when you have problematic situations in class, the best advice is to be lovingly generous and give a lot of room for students to push back. I do think that there are times when a teacher needs to put a line in the sand, but that's not coming up for me in the question so far. Now I want to turn to another group of questions that I got. The first one is, what core values and principles guide your teaching philosophy? That's a great question. And I think, to be honest, well, that's such a funny statement because I'm being honest the whole time, apparently. But to be self-reflective, I should say, my core values have changed over these 25 years of teaching. And I only know that by looking back and discovering how my behavior has changed. And the key is that what I now can say based on my experience is that the most important thing for me is to learn to live and teach authentically. That sounds cliche, but let me break it down. Authenticity is, in my view, when we are sharing who we are directly. We're not sharing some commentary, but we're sharing who we are. So that means, teaching authentically is going to require authentic practice. So authenticity to me in teaching is directly linked to practice and study. And I have some comments on the way that practice is done these days. Now I'm going to share a few thoughts on that. And I know this is not a blanket statement for everyone, but there is some trends I see certainly in the world of yoga that I see around me in Hong Kong and Shanghai and Singapore, and also on like social media and stuff. One of the things is that there is a hyper focus on what the practice looks like. And it's driven, I think, unfortunately, we're all kind of consumed by video and pictures. So I do see a lot of teachers who are preoccupied with videoing their practice for content. And that can be a very helpful aspect to building a career of teaching, because you can present your practice and you can show some expertise in that. And you can use that to attract students to come and study with you if they see what they like, if they see your practice and that's what they like. So this is all, I don't think that is bad at all. The problem is that we are unfortunately consumed by the mirrors in practice and looking at what it looks like and sort of forgetting that the authentic experience requires us to not be so attached to the outer appearance. But instead, the outer appearance can be in good form. You can use our alignment, our props, use a mirror if you need, use a teacher's feedback to the degree that you know that you're doing a pose safely. But at that stage, we must learn to go internal, inside, to feel the layers of the body and the mind, to feel the experience of our fullness, our full aliveness. To teach authentically means we must practice authentically. And that means turn the phones off, turn the camera off. Do not be filming everything. Do not use all your practice for content. And do not, you can't, there's an unfortunate part of the current world where everything is documented. And if it's not documented, it doesn't have value. So my philosophy is really about authenticity, and authenticity is the ground of humility, vulnerability. Humility is a core attribute of spiritual practice to transcend our egoic self-centeredness. And humility, the word humility, there's I was reminded this week also that the word humility has its roots in humus or human. I can't remember what it is, but which means earth, like dirt. Earth. Humility is earth. So in order to experience a deeper quality of humility, we're actually asked to go in the dirt, to get your hands in the dirt, to get, go down to the earth and get your hands dirty. That's it's like the Buddha leaving the palace into the streets of India and going out with all the people, like the dirty streets. And there's a humility to getting ourselves deep into reality. Now, for me in practice, what that means is you have to get away from looking pretty and be able to go deeply into ourselves and to feel the earth, let's say the dirt, the ground of our being. So to practice in a way where we make connection to how we feel, How we feel is the goal. To connect deeply with how we feel, use the physical practices, all the outer alignments, put us into a good systematic position. But it isn't to just be in a good position. It is to, what do we feel? How do I feel? And that feeling is a fruit of humility. It is a fruit of humility. Humility is a component of authenticity. So the question was, what are your core values? Authenticity. In Wild Lotus, this name of my yoga school, we have the central aim of Wild Lotus is, Jan, no. Hold off and go water. That reminds me of COVID. Where was I? Oh yeah, Wild Lotus, my yoga school, we have the aim, the central aim is to live in a state of full aliveness. And to me, that is an expression of authenticity on all the levels of our being. Our higher mind, our face, the beauty of our outside, through all the layers of our being, to the deepest ground of our being. When we are able to practice authentically, one of the measures for authentic practice, or I would maybe even say one of the ways that we can account for the practice being authentic over time, is that we are not doing it for anyone else, and we are not, in the process of the practice, we are no longer consumed with what anyone else thinks. So that would be the other people in class around you, or even the teacher ultimately. It's funny because we desperately want the teacher to acknowledge that we're doing it well. So we do care. But you care so deeply that eventually the transmission from teacher to student is so profound that we say, bow to your teacher. The teacher of teachers ultimately is the teacher within. As cliche as that sounds, to me, this is a very good example of when we are very authentic when we're fully authentic in our practice. We are fully lined up with the teacher and following and going for it completely. You lose the sense of separation between you and your teacher, and you're just in the teachings. And it becomes so liberating, so freeing, that when you go to teach after that kind of a practice, you are no longer judging your students. You're no longer sort of quantifying how many and how good they are. And you're just channeling the teachings themselves. And I'm saying this from a place of I still aspire to that, day by day. I'm not saying that I'm living in that consistently, but I am certainly aspiring to that as this core value of my teaching has been revealed to be authenticity. Okay. This next question is, how can yoga teachers cultivate not just skilled students, but also leaders who can inspire positive change in the world? Another great question. So I think that one of the indicators, or let's say one of the key attributes of a yoga teacher, if we're looking at the field of wellness coaches or fitness coaches and yoga teachers, I think that yoga has some unique characteristics. One being, we are aiming to help people transform their lives in a spiritual way. And so we have to identify, what do we mean when we say, yoga is a spiritual practice? One way is, one way is that yoga has an external form, the poses and the experience of our yoga on the outside, but also yoga is focused on the inside, as I was just talking about. So the yoga teacher is looking for, or using the tools of yoga to help their students transform internally and externally. So we say the virtues of yoga, like nonviolence, truthfulness, non-stealing, non-attachment, non-indulgence, all these kind of yama, niyama, purity, contentment, etc. To develop these qualities, these virtues of yoga, is a key component of the practice. We're not just doing the physical gesture of asana. I mean, maybe we are, but the aim is that as a yoga teacher, I think what identifies someone who is a yoga teacher compared to, say, maybe your more general fitness instructor, whom can be incredible. I bow to all my trainers, they're amazing. But one of the distinctions is that we're looking at it from a philosophical position. Yoga, at its heart, is a philosophy that uses practices to develop the philosophical values. So in that, I believe that how we train or mentor our students is by developing those attributes in our practice. Again, you can't teach anyone, something that, you can't transmit something you haven't experienced. And that one of the core dynamics between student and teacher in yoga is transmission. It's not just information, but it's like when you're around a profound teacher, you benefit from the energy of their life in yoga. You benefit from the energy. Like when I walk into the gym, there's the energy of the gym, right? When I go to Pure Fitness or whatever, I can walk in the room and the music's going and they're pumping iron and people are doing the high rocks training, and it's like I get a buzz off that energy. It's like, wow. Well, similarly, when you walk into a yoga room and there is a profound practitioner or a profound teacher, the energy of this person is already influencing us. And so when we want to inspire people to live with a positive impact, and when we want to, impart on if we're teaching people and maybe mentoring teachers, if we're aiming to have people have not just carry the technical aspects of yoga, but to carry forward sort of the deeper components of the yogic path, the best way to do it is not to tell them. Like I can remember early in my yoga life, preaching about the yamas and the niyamas and not really understanding what it meant to embody them. How do I tell someone, to be nonviolent and to practice contentment when I was neither? I was mired in highs and lows of anger and low energy, or I was mired in conflict within myself, and I was preaching something I didn't quite understand. So instead, the approach is to develop a practice that has discipline in a way that produces results of these values. So one example I have is ahimsa is the first rung on the classical yogic ladder. Ahimsa is the first yama. So in the sage Patanjali's path from his sutra, we have the 8 limbs of yoga, Ashtanga. And the first limb is yama. And the first yama, so it's going down, it's like Russian dolls. The first yama is ahimsa. So ahimsa is classically taught as non-violence or non-harming. So the first act is to do no harm. So now, how do you develop that in practice? Well, first, start to study yoga in a way where you don't harm your body. You start to study with someone that has a depth of understanding of the body and the asana so that you can develop your practice in a way that is helpful and not reckless, not too fast, not too, et cetera, et cetera. Now, that's one point. But let's take ahimsa further. The ahimsa starts in the mind. The mind is where the violence begins. So our mind has a tendency to either accept or reject. We say yum or yuck. And there's this kind of reductive tendency of the mind, and it has the roots of violence in this binary behavior. So to approach life differently, yoga offers us the idea to practice with awareness, not with judgment. That means if we're going to study yoga, we go to practice and we go to a teacher, and you have to, travel around, study with people until you find someone that you're willing to say, this person is good enough to study with for a while, even if it's only 10 days every year. But you go and you give them full attention, and you take the blanket when they say, and you go and do this when they say, and you don't have a battle in your mind when the teacher says something and you go, yay, and they say something else, you go, nah. And you go through this binary process of going yum and yuck and yum and yuck. And it keeps the mind just as it was when you finish your practice, no change. That carries forward the fruits or the seeds of violence, conflict, and always being like accepting and rejecting. So we come to practice to develop the virtues. We need to have a discipline, which is generally through the dynamic of a teacher, where we're willing to follow some clear ideas, even when our mind is saying, nah. I'm not saying do something that hurts you and follow blindly. I'm saying follow even when you're kind of like, nah. We need to have some ability. No, let's say it again. We need some willingness for change, because the virtues of yoga are not inherent. Human behavior it's attached to comfort, and it rejects any kind of pushback on that comfort. So yoga practice and meditation practice and so forth, yin yoga or any type of practice has this aspect to it where let's choose a path for an hour. Let's stick to the plan. Let's not stick to the mood. The mood will just take you wherever. Stick to the plan. And you develop these virtues over time. It's incredible. So in that way, I find when I develop these virtues and I start to see how I react less to the triggers that I'm naturally born with or have developed over my life, I start to react less. I know, the virtues are ripening. The seeds of these virtues are ripening, and that becomes a very powerful thing that you can transmit to the people that come to you. When you start to develop, a more clear mind, be less reactive, less triggered. When you have a clear mind and an open heart, people feel it. And it seems to me that when you have a clear mind, as a fruit of practice, the waters of the heart seem more harmonious. A clear mind builds a harmonious heart. And from that, you can teach very strongly. You can teach so clearly. You can teach, here we go, authentically. Because you're not hiding yourself in the emotions you feel. You're not hiding all your judgments. You can teach straightforward, and you feel through that, you feel very connected to students. Next question. I'm going to go another 10 minutes. It says, this question is, how can we maintain essential human touch in practices where many things have gone online and somehow feel less authentic? So that's a good question. I'm starting to go online more. My work is transitioning to more online stuff. I'm doing online mentorships, and I'm doing practices on Zoom, etc. And if any of you are interested, you can write to me. And little pitch that came out of nowhere. But I see that I used to be really kind of a naysayer about online work, and I have had a really profound experience online. I was studying with someone online for the last 2 years, and I had great practices, and I've been doing mentorships online. And what I've seen is that if you can be truly present while you're online, even just right now, truly present, and be receptive, because one of the problems with online stuff is it tends to be one way. So I find human intimacy and contact is really about both people feeling connected, being seen, being heard, and all of that. So as a presenter or a teacher online, we have to be willing to then take time to listen, to watch, to observe, and to receive those on the other end. Because if we don't do that, it can feel almost like the people on the other side are actually two-dimensional, like they're not human. We can sort of operate, like I'm looking at all the names on the list here, but I'm constantly thinking about the humans I'm talking to. And I always usually have some people in my mind that I know are going to listen, including my mother. And so I speak with these people in my mind, so I'm really talking as if I'm with somebody. And this has had a really profound effect on me. Now, the last question I have here is really about physical touch. Physical touch and adjustments in yoga. It's interesting because my studies of yoga and my studies and my teachers, little did I realize, I never thought I was old school, but I have now come to realize that I began yoga, pre-internet, pre-social media, pre-all that. And so a lot of things were done. I mean, I've been in practices where lots of stuff was done that would not be done now because of the pushback if it was to be online. And I see that that's a good thing. So maybe in past times, things, maybe were a little too aggressive, and there's lots of documentation about a lot of people that maybe were doing bad adjustments and all this. But I was trained in physical adjustments. My teachers were masters, and I don't say that lightly. I'm talking, I studied with absolute masters, and I'll take any kind of feedback from anyone here. These people have logged more hours of yoga practice and teaching and physical adjustments than anyone on earth. And in that, I was a direct recipient of them. So I have it in my body. And I had great healings, great transformations through those adjustments. And so I teach from what I learned, as I said earlier, this different levels of teachers. One is the acharya. I'm not saying I'm an acharya, but that term is someone who teaches only what they experienced. So I don't feel like I have experienced more than anyone else. I just know that I've experienced a very unique aspect of yoga for myself, and I choose to be generous in that I want to give people the experience I had. I really, as best I can, try to transmit what my teachers taught me in the way they taught me and give it. The more I'm able to help students, physical touch becomes more and more valuable. I don't touch just anybody. I rarely touch anyone that's new to my class. I see online there's a lot of pushback, and I see a lot of people writing in. I'm sure I'm going to get a whole horde of new haters, which I'm amazed. I have more haters than people that adore the work that I do. It's so hilarious. I mean, it's so funny to see all these yoga masters talk horribly about other teachers online. One of the teachings I got years ago was from one of my first Buddhist teachers. And he said, never talk poorly about another person trying to help people on a spiritual path. And here we are on Instagram where everyone's destroying each other. Anyway, on that note, the physical touch is a profound way of feeling the layers of the body. Skin, fascia, all of this. Below that, the muscles, even the bony structure. The physical adjustment is something we have to study well with a teacher who's experienced and not do kind of haphazard stuff. It's better no adjustment than a poor adjustment. But the physical contact in yoga is no different than being at the gym. When I go to the gym, my trainer puts their hands on me and adjusts me into position. And I don't go, oh my God, don't do that. They adjust me skillfully, and then I find the direct action they want me to do, and then I can perform it better. And I remember the touch. So I believe that physical adjustment has more a more profound place in the process of truly knowing yoga today than ever before, but it just needs really careful study and observation. The best adjustments are generally made by observing students carefully, careful observation, and then from that observation, learning to see what would be helpful, not going into fixed poses. That's not what I meant by adjustments. Not trying to fix poses, but by giving people some intelligence of our hands to their body in a way that is not invasive. Okay, all these disclaimers I have to make, but in a way that creates this transmission of wisdom. The body wisdom of Hatha Yoga is so profound. It's so profound. The body wisdom. I can remember getting a physical adjustment from my teacher and coming out and I swear, to God, what I felt was I didn't even remember my name. I came out and I'm like, wow. The feeling of freedom in the body when we do a pose deeply in really good alignment transmits a message to the nervous system and the brain and the heart, and it frees us. My friends, that is the purpose of yoga, to experience freedom from the inside out, to be free in our mind, not our mind occupied by what do I look like? What do people think of me? These things that we all suffer. We all suffer that stuff. But yoga is meant to clear that, like to blow that away, to be free from, our personal social scrutiny of like, am I good? Am I bad? Do I look good? Is this, all of this. We battle that every day. So our practice becomes a place where we can clear that internal social scrutiny and that sort of self-sabotaging where I'm not good enough, constantly thinking I'm not good enough. I mean, I'm into the practice where, my poses and pictures used to be way more, fantastic in my view. And so now when I'm doing poses, I know, hi Mary, I know that if I sit and scrutinize my body and my practice and what I look like today compared to, yoga journal 20 years ago or, whatever, I know that I'm going to be, at a loss today and feel horrible. And I know that is not the purpose of yoga. That is not the purpose of doing the poses over and over. It's not helpful. And if I occupy my mind with worrying about how good I used to be or what people think, what happens is you carry that into your head and into your class as a teacher. So again, I circle back. All of the questions are threaded together, which means the practice is the heart of yoga. And if we want to transmit the heart of yoga, we have to be willing to practice sincerely, to be deep in our practice, even if it's whatever, it's a 45-minute practice a day or 1 hour a day or whatever that is. The ability to practice deeply without concern for what anyone else thinks of it frees our mind little by little and allows us to slowly release the attachments that cause conflict in the mind and then conflict with others. I hope that was helpful. I'll have to review it to hear exactly what I said, but here we are. It's now 4:56, and I think that there was a question earlier. Someone wrote in, I was sort of reading it, about becoming a new teacher and traveling the world to teach and all that. And I would say that, I do believe traveling is a key part of yoga, seeing the world, because yoga is a discovery of the inner life. So it's natural as a tendency of a yogi to want to discover the outer life, to travel the world and discover people and sort of break down barriers of, different races, different ethnicities, different languages is a part of yoga. It has been for me. And I recognize I travel a lot. I'm leaving for India again. So I know there's a lot in travel, but as time goes on, the deep discovery is found within. I know it sounds cliche. And that is go somewhere quiet, close your eyes, feel into yourself, feel yourself, feel what you feel. Let that guide you. Let messages of that experience guide you. Send you all my love. I will, if I get messages from you guys saying that was good, I'll do it again. I will, tell me if it was worth it. I don't want to waste anyone's time. But otherwise, thank you so much. And I'm here in service to any practitioner, any teacher that wants my help. You can write to me questions as you wish. And I wish you all well. And hi, Eva. And I wish you a happy year of the fire horse. Okay. Namaste. Namaste.